Week 15 of the fantasy football season, and with the playoffs starting in most fantasy leagues, this is a tough matchup, obviously, and it's win or go home. So here's every quarterback start sit this week. The first game, Thursday Night Football, Los Angeles Chargers at the Vegas Raiders. So right now, this Charger team, they haven't played good over the last few weeks. This Raider team pretty much hasn't been good all season, and now Justin Herbert's banged up. Easton Stick is going to start this game, and obviously, in a big playoff matchup for most fantasy owners, you're not going to trust a youngster who obviously wasn't that great in college football and was a late-round pick, so he's a sit. Aidan O'Connell, he goes out there and he gives it his best, no doubt about it, but he's just not a quarterback in terms of fantasy football. That's a guy this season that's going to make an impact and help fantasy owners. So this week in a matchup versus a Charger defense that's pounced on younger and bad quarterbacks this season, he's a sit. First Saturday game of a triple-header, Minnesota Vikings at the Cincinnati Bengals. So Joshua Dobbs, he got pulled and he looked horrible in the last two outings. Now, 4 interceptions in that Week 12 loss versus the Chicago Bears. And then last week in Week 14, just couldn't put points on the board with Joshua Dobbs. And Nick Mullins came in the fourth quarter. But both quarterbacks are sits for me. Nick Mullins, we know he's had some starting experience in the past with the 49ers, but he really hasn't started in many seasons, even with good weapons. Even if Justin Jefferson does find a way to suit up in this ball game, he's not a quarterback I would start. He's a sit. Jake Browning a start. The last 2 weeks, Browning's come in and played great football for Joe Burrow. This kid, he knows how to be poised and calm in the pocket. He had a little bit of an injury scare, but luckily it was just a thumb cramp, and he came back and played great football. So the last 2 weeks, he's putting up numbers, 25-plus fantasy points 2 weeks in a row. In a matchup versus a beatable secondary, even though, like I said, they did shut down the Raiders, I think Browning, once again, is a quarterback you could start. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Indianapolis Colts, second game on Saturday. Mitchell Trubisky, he's a sit. We know Mitchell Trubisky, he's been a bust where he went in the NFL draft many seasons ago, drafted by the Chicago Bears. And this week in a matchup at a middle-of-the-pack Indianapolis Colts defense that has a knack for causing turnovers and pick sixes this season. He's not a quarterback I have any confidence in. He's a sit. Gardner Minshew, he's been pretty solid filling in all season for Anthony Richardson, where he went down early in the year. But Gardner Minshew in a tougher matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league. After coming off of losing 2 games in a row, I think this Steelers defense, they're going to get back to basics. They're going to focus in. And Gardner Minshew, you know he's good for a turnover or 2 per game because he's a gunslinger as well. See, he's a sit. And the last game on Saturday night, Denver Broncos at the Lions. So this Bronco team, what a turnaround it's been for them this season. Starting the year 1-5, people thought Sean Payton didn't have it anymore. And this team's turned their whole season around now in the playoff hunt. 7-6. So Russell Wilson playing some good football. The best football he's played in the last 2-3 seasons is Russ. Him and Courtland Sutton have a great rapport. Russ, he's making plays when he needs them at crucial times in the game. And this week at the Lions, I could see a potential shootout between these two teams. So Russell Wilson's a start. Jared Goff, better quarterback at home than he's been on the road over the last few seasons with this Lion team. And this game, like I said, could be a potential shootout. St. Brown, Sam Laporta, they had quiet games for the most part. But I think versus Denver defense, that's middle of the pack, this Lion offense could find success. And Jared Goff's a start. Kansas City Chiefs at the New England Patriots. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, a bad loss. And they blame the refs in that game for Tani being offsides, but he really was offsides, but that's a story for another day. But Mahomes' numbers haven't been as elite as of the season, and it's his wide receivers just dropping passes and not running the right routes. But this week at the Patriots, I expect Patrick Mahomes and this offense to explode for their biggest game of the season. And Mahomes, obviously a top-notch start. Bailey Zapp, good game last week. They knocked off the Pittsburgh Steelers as the underdogs on Thursday night. But this week versus a good Kansas City defense that holds offenses down. Mid-teens, low 20s every ball game. Bailey Zapp, I don't see him finding success in this game. And like I said, after coming off a bad loss like the Chiefs did, their defense is going to go in there as well and play great. So he's a sit. New York Jets at the Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins beat this Jet team on Black Friday pretty easily. But Zach Wilson didn't start that game. But Zach Wilson, I know he finally went out there and had a great game. And everyone thinks now he's turned the corner because he had one game over 300 yards. But this week in Miami, I don't see Zach Wilson really doing much. Zach Wilson still made some of the same mistakes, throwing off his back foot, throwing across his body. Brady had a good game versus the Houston Texans in Week 14. But this week at the Dolphins in a game where they could be trailing early and often. And this Jet offense becomes one-dimensional. He's a sit. Tua, he's a start each and every week. He's having an MVP caliber type of season. Him and Tyreek Hill, the most dangerous combination, in my opinion, in the NFL. And even versus a good defense like the New York Jets, we saw Hill and Tua put up numbers. And once again this week, I think that happened. Chicago Bears, at the Cleveland Browns. Justin Fields, we know he's one of the best running quarterbacks in the league. Also, we know it's not pretty at times, but for the most part, he goes out there and he puts up fantasy points. And we saw it last week with a good victory versus the Detroit Lions. Him and DJ Moore have been on the same page. Cole Kmet, he's been a solid tight end over the last few seasons here with Justin Fields. And this week, even in a tough matchup at the Cleveland Browns, I think Justin Fields can figure it out and find a way to be a top 15 quarterback. And he's a start this week. Joe Flacco, he's been back now the last 2 games for this Brown team. After all season, he was sitting on the couch and now is named the starter the remainder of the year. But this week, I know this bad defense isn't all that great, but the last few weeks, they've definitely improved and gone out there and make plays. But Joe Flacco's a borderline option to me. So Flacco, he's still got the arm strength. We know he's 38 years old and a statue in the pocket if you get a hand on him. But this week, even versus a bad defense that's beatable, he's a borderline option. Because imagine going into a playoff game in your normal 12, 14-team leagues and having Flacco your quarterback. It's just tough to imagine that you could have 100% confidence in him. So he's borderline Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. So CJ Stroud, he left that game with a concussion versus the New York Jets, and it was a poor game for him as well. So we don't know if Stroud's going to play. Obviously, he does. It's a good matchup versus division rival, the Tennessee Titans, where they give up a lot of pass yards this season. And CJ Stroud, he's been a Rookie of the Year favorite over the last few weeks. I know he's lost weapons. Tank Dell out for the season. Nico Collins, we'll see if he plays in this ball game. But anyway, CJ Stroud, if he does start, is going to start for me. Davis Mills is sit if he's going to be the starting quarterback in this game. We saw enough of Davis Mills last season to know he's not really a quarterback that's going to put up fantasy points, even in a plus matchup at the Tennessee Titans. There's no way people should go out there and have confidence in Mills. Will Levis, he's a sit. I know Will Levis, he showed some flashes this season. We know he's got a big arm. We know he's got DeAndre Hopkins, Derrick Henry in that offense, but it's pretty much been up and down for the most part for this Tennessee offense, where their offensive line is one of the worst in the league. So Will Levis this week is a sit. New York Giants, New Orleans Saints, and Tommy DeVito. It's been a good story, no doubt about it, for DeVito going out there and playing good games. But this week in a tougher matchup at the Saints, I know it's an indoor game, which is always a plus for any football player, and that doesn't have to deal with the weather or anything. But Tommy DeVito, think about that as well in a Week 15 playoff game. Unless you have no other options, or in the deepest of leagues, he's tough to trust, is Tommy DeVito. And he don't really have a true number 1 wide receiver. Weapons on the offense besides Saquon Barkley. So this week in a matchup where we just saw the Saints defense have a field day, even though I know it was the Carolina Panthers, this Giant offensive line isn't all that great. And I think the Saints defense could disrupt DeVito in this one. He's a sit. Derek Carr sit for me as well. This season, it's just been tough for Carr to find a way to get that second touchdown. I know Carr's got good passing yards on the year, but to get 2 touchdowns in a game and like 250, 300 yards just hasn't been there for Derek Carr. So this week, I know it's versus a Giant defense that isn't all that great, but it's a Giant defense that's played better for the most part over the last few weeks. So Derek Carr is a sit. Atlanta Falcons at the Carolina Panthers. This game, you pretty much don't want anyone on your team to start. And if you do, I don't know how you made the playoffs with a Desmond Ridder or Bryce Young at quarterback, unless it's in 2 quarterback leagues or the deepest of leagues. So Desmond Ridder, he's been one of the worst quarterbacks this season in pro football. And this week, even in a plus matchup at the Carolina Panthers, he's not a quarterback I could trust. He's a sit. Bryce Young, first pick overall. And I know it's 1 year. I know not a lot of help on the offense, but so far, he's looked like a bust. Same mistakes. Undersized quarterback. And yes, you don't have weapons. Adam Thielen is number 1 wide receiver. Obviously isn't a thing that's going to make a quarterback over the top. So right now, while Bryce Young hasn't done much this season, and it's a middle of the pack matchup, he's a sit. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Green Bay Packers. Baker Mayfield, he's been a gamer this season, and he's keeping his team in the hunt right now for first place in that division. So Baker Mayfield, good weapons. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, even though Godwin, his numbers have definitely dropped off this season with Baker. Rashad White out of the backfield. K-Dot as a decent tight end option. So this could be a potential shootout in Lambeau Field. Love, he's been playing great football this season here, especially over the last few weeks where this Packer team's totally turned their season around. He's stretching the football down the field. I know Christian Watson's been a big part of this offense, and we'll see if he could get back in this ball game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Jordan Love, I have confidence in him. He extends the play. He's got a good arm. Packer team really rallies around him. So this week, he's a start. San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. Brock Purdy, what a season it's been for Purdy. MVP candidate, no doubt about it. I know he's got a lot of great weapons. George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. But this week in a matchup versus one of the weaker defenses and a team he's familiar with in the Arizona Cardinals, he's a start once again. Kyler Murray, tough matchup, no doubt about it. Not a lot of weapons on the offense besides Trey McBride and James Conner as guys who week in and week out put up fantasy points. Kyler Murray with his legs, we know, gets a lot of yards. But this week in a tough matchup, it's going to be tough to trust him, in my opinion. So he's borderline. Washington Commanders at the Los Angeles Rams. Sam Howell, he's amongst the league leaders in passing yards this season. And think about it, Terry McLaurin's not really having a good year. Jahan Dotson has taken a step back stats-wise this season. But Sam Howell's still going out there and putting up fantasy points. So in a potential shootout in Los Angeles, I think Sam Howell once again is a quarterback all season that's proven he could put up fantasy points. He's a start. Matthew Stafford, the last 4 or 5 weeks of the year, he's putting up fantasy points. And when you got great weapons like Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams out of the backfield, the points are going to be there. And this week versus one of the worst defenses in the league in the Commanders, he's an easy start. Is Stafford. Dallas Cowboys at the Buffalo Bills. Dak Prescott, he's having a great season and an MVP candidate. Over the last few weeks, he's getting a hang of this West Coast offense, and this Cowboy team's putting up points in a hurry. Dak Prescott, he's not turning the football over much this season. And this week, I know it's a tough matchup and a tough environment to go over there in Buffalo, but Dak Prescott, he's a start pretty much each and every week. Josh Allen, a start. Best quarterback in fantasy football in terms of fantasy points. We know he's a gunslinger. We know he's turned the football over at times as well. But even versus a tough Dallas Cowboy defense that has a knack for turning the football over and finding the end zone, Josh Allen in a must-win game for this Bill team as a start. Sunday Night Football, Baltimore Ravens at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Lamar Jackson having an MVP type of season. This Raven team just keep finding ways to win 10-3 on the year. I know Mark Andrews out for the season, but Isaiah Likely's been stepping up. Odell Beckham's been playing better. Zay Flowers. And this week in a potential shootout with top AFC teams going at it in Jacksonville, he's a star. Trevor Lawrence, I thought he was going to be out multiple weeks with that ankle sprain, but Lawrence is a gamer. He's a tough guy. He put in a decent performance at the Cleveland Browns in a tough Week 14 loss. And this week versus the Baltimore Ravens, a good defense that makes it tough for quarterbacks to put up yards and find points. I think Lawrence with good weapons like Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, Parker Washington stepping up with Christian Kirk out, could go out there and put up some fantasy points in a shootout like I mentioned. And final game of the week, Monday Night Football, Philadelphia Eagles at the Seattle Seahawks. Jalen Hurts is a star for me. We know Hurts the last couple of weeks, the numbers haven't been all that great. Last week, this Cowboy team shut him down, but this week going to Seattle on Monday night, I think Jalen Hurts and this offense gets back on track. The Seattle defense definitely leaky. I know they got some ball hawks and playmakers, but Jalen Hurts still goes out there and he makes plays for this Philadelphia Eagle team. So he's a start. Geno Smith, Drew Lock, whoever starts in this one I can't trust. I know a few weeks ago Geno Smith lit up the scoreboard at the Dallas Cowboys in Week 13, but then missing last week's game versus the Niners with the groin injury. And even if he comes back versus a Philly team that's got to get this defense backing up going, I think he's going to make it tough for Geno. And he's a sit-in. Drew Lock, he had early success in that ball game, but he couldn't get the job done for this Seattle team at the San Francisco 49ers. So in a matchup on Monday night, Drew Lock, if he starts in this game in a Week 15 matchup for fantasy owners, is tough to trust. That's quarterback start sits every matchup for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.